Hi, this is Mike Warner from Work Hard Playlist Hard. You're listening to Your Morning Coffee, the podcast with my friends Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart. Weekly music news for the new music business.
From Billboard, too many songs, not enough hits. Pop music is struggling to create new stars.
From Hypebot and Bill Werde, music industry growth is booming, and it's slowing. What?
And from the Wall Street Journal, TikTok parent ByteDance sets sight on Spotify with music streaming expansion. Boy, Jay, this is going to be a good episode. We've got so much to cover. In addition to those articles, we've been chatting here for another half hour, so I'm excited to get ready to rock. So everyone, kick back and relax, because Jay and I are ready to start the show right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air. On the air. On the air. On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Well, a groovy good day to you, Jay. I got to admit, I am so bummed out that my Dodgers gagged, and they are out of it.
I'm so sorry.
Such an epic year, and now it's time to be a football fan, I suppose. I'm like, damn. I'm just crying in my buttermilk.
There's always next year.
There is always next year. Hope springs eternal. Hope springs eternal. Well, Jay, you've had a busy week is sort of an understatement. I know you're behind the set list, which of course you do with Glenn Peoples. You had Gavin Rossdale, and now you guys recorded 311 as well. You getting such big acts. It's epic.
Well, it's been so much fun, and thank you for mentioning it. Gavin Rossdale, from Bush, is such a great interview. The audio quality wasn't that great. I think he was in a tour bus somewhere, but it was an absolute amazing conversation, and that dropped this last week. And we just finished editing the 311 conversation, and that'll go live, I think, in this upcoming week. But thanks for mentioning that. I also did every week I do the Music Biz Weekly podcast with Mike Brandvold. And this last week I did it solo, which happens like maybe 3 or 4 times a year. It rarely happens where Mike can't make it, and we've done, I think, 500 episodes. But this one was the CEO of this company called Rise. And I use Rise, and their CEO's name is Tim Jack. And what it's all about is helping you grow your fan base on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok by using targeted online advertising. And it's not very expensive, and they don't use any bots, no fake streams, no fake playlists or any of that stuff. And just really quickly, I wanted to tell you about some of their campaigns, because as you and I mentioned in the last couple of weeks, there's around 100,000 songs uploaded every day. There's 100 million songs on popular DSPs like Apple Music. And so, in the interview, I asked him, how do you target fans or likely fans? And he told me about, on Spotify, they have one of these campaigns are for Spotify conversion. One is just for exposure. And then he has one that's for playlist growth. And they have similar things for YouTube and Instagram. So if you're looking for a way to reach your audience or grow your audience inexpensively, check out rise.la. Can't even say it. Rise.la. It's super cool.
Well, and it's excellent timing to mention that as we talk about some of the things we're going to talk about today, without a doubt. So, and then we were just chatting, and you mentioned you had a really interesting lunch with somebody that we are super familiar with, you know, people. This gentleman made so many fantastic records in the 70s and 80s, and oh my God! So it must have been.
I was having one of those Chris Farley moments, you know, just trying to hold it all together. I had lunch with Jack Douglas, who's, you know, one of my heroes. And if you don't know who Jack Douglas is, he produced, you know, John Lennon and Yoko Ono Double Fantasy, all those cool Aerosmith records and Cheap Trick's first album. He's got this new thing with Susan Michelson called Rock Spell. And what they do is they put together things like this first one is the Detroit Youth Orchestra. And they, you know, in their description, it says a joyful fusion of rock and R&B. And, you know, they bring together dance hits from Motown to Woodstock. So they were second place winners on America's Got Talent. So you may be familiar with those. But to sit down with a guy who's produced some of, you know, what I consider to be some of the greatest rock records in history was really humbling. It was really cool.
Oh, it's always fun. And it's even more fun when you meet your idols and they're what you wanted, what you expected, you know?
Well, yeah, you introduced me to Greg Penny years ago, and I feel the same way about Greg, you know, as a producer and an engineer, and just he is such a great guy. And you never want to meet your idols because sometimes they'll disappoint you. But as you can attest, you could sit and talk with Greg all day long about music. He's just so great to be around.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you and I talk about books all the time because we love the music books, the books related to the music industry and artists and all that stuff. And you had mentioned to me that you just picked up, and I haven't even read it. I remember I've listened to part of his audio, the 2 chapters I think that he did where he read it himself from his autobiography. And the book is called Me. And you told me you've read it and now you're going to reread it.
Well, you haven't mentioned who it is yet.
Oh, Elton John. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Elton John.
Elton John wrote an autobiography. And it was released in 2019, and I bought it and I set it on my nightstand with a stack of other books, and I just hadn't gotten to it yet. I finally read it, and it was amazing. I liked it so much that I bought the audiobook, so when I'm traveling this coming week, I'll listen to it then as well. And I mean, Elton John's life is, I thought I kind of knew. I'm such a huge fan, and I thought I'd read so many things on him that I understood everything that he had done. But, I mean, this is a guy that has 38 gold and 31 platinum or multi-platinum albums. He's sold over 300 million records worldwide. He was named the most successful male solo artist in the Billboard Hot 100 chart history. 9 number ones and 27 top 10s. He's performed over 4,000 times in 80 countries. Goes on and on and on. And the last thing I'll mention on Elton John is that on the Music Biz Weekly podcast this coming week, we're having Jillian Garr on, and she just wrote a book called Elton 75, Elton at 75. And for those Elton John fans out there, you're going to be blown away when you see this book.
Well, and you know, he really is an artist without peer. When you think about, now there's lots of artists from that era, from let's say the 60s, you know, the Paul McCartneys, the Roger Waters, you know, a lot of artists that are still doing it, still performing, still doing albums. But, you know, to be on the pop charts at his age, and he's got, I think he's got a duet with Dua Lipa, he's got that track, Britney Spears. I think I is still...
He's always stayed relevant.
Yeah.
He did duets with Eminem and Guns N' Roses, and the list goes on and on and on. So I would add that to our kind of our mock book club, the Your Morning Coffee book club. And you and I talked last week I think we were talking about the Warner book, and the next one up is this book by Rebecca Biblin and Cory Doctorow called Checkpoint Capitalism.
Choke Point.
And what was that?
You said checkpoint. It's choke point capitalism.
Oh, you're right. It is choke point. Little autocorrect error there. Anyway, that's kind of next up for me. So maybe we can talk about that in the coming weeks.
And I have that in my cart, and I need to actually just hit buy because I do want to do that. Speaking of producers, and I'll give a shout out to a book that's actually on my shelf.
Sure.
And it's right behind me. or no, it's not behind me. Anyway, there's a great book. I don't think it's ever been released in the States, but it was released in the UK, and it's a book on Todd Rundgren. But it's not about his career as an artist; it's about his production career, and really interesting, and how he's worked with XTC, and of course he produced the big Meatloaf album "Bad Outta Hell," and
so many Bourgeois Tag, Cheap Trick.
Yeah.
I mean, he's produced.
Fascinating book, and he has a reputation of being tough in the studio because
You take that back.
He's fast and he doesn't want to dilly dally, and
Yeah.
as he gives artists a chance to do their own songs. But he said, if you can't do it, I'm going to get out there and sing it. So he is a taskmaster. And interestingly enough, there's only been one band that has ever worked with him twice, and that would be Grand Funk Railroad. But
Wow.
another great book that just hit me.
Let's put that on the list. I want to read that, and we should
great.
send that to our mutual friend Fran, who works
Yes.
over with Merck.
With Merck, yeah,
because
she's a big
such a
Todd
huge.
fan. Yes, yeah,
exactly.
And Todd's out with some. There's another thing. I just saw a YouTube video that was done. There's some David Bowie tribute band that's Adrian Belew is in it, and Todd Rundgren appears to be in it. I don't even know what that is, but I'm watching it. Who's that? What is that? So
Yeah.
everybody's
So
busy.
cool.
Everybody's busy,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and then a couple of things we needed to chat about. Apple Music has a revamped Apple Music for Artists, which is interesting.
And SoundCloud just launched SoundCloud for Artists. The Apple Music for Artists, I'm really excited about because it's a tool that I use, every day.
Yeah.
And if you want to check out the new Apple Music for Artists, go to artists.apple.com. And then that first item listed there is, experience the upgraded Apple Music for Artists. And they go into, you really have to check it out because there's some things that aren't in the press release that you'll see on Apple Music for Artists now that are super cool. But they stated, it's a new set of options to personalize your artist page. And that's cool, and connect with fans. Like, for the longest time, Spotify had the most functionality when it came to updating your artist page. You could do social links and bio and photos and photo gallery and, your artist and the banner and all of that stuff. And I think that Apple is now caught up, but they're doing a lot of other things. So, when you log into your artist profile, you'll notice that there's two new sections in the top navigation: artist content and account. These sections will help you personalize your profile and loop in your team for support.
Wow, good for them. Yeah. Well, it's we've talked about Spotify kind of leading the pack always for a lot of these functionality things that they for artists and for data and things like that. But Apple will get around to it when they get around to it, right?
Yeah, they did, and they've got some cool things like updating your lyrics, which I thought was pretty cool. I haven't had a chance to explore the SoundCloud for artists, so I'm looking forward to spending some time with that. But that officially debuted this last week. And one thing I wanted to tell you about that's coming, I think we mentioned it a week or two ago, is a documentary on John Waite, who you'll remember, from The Babies and Bad English and his solo career, Missing You, all of that stuff. I had the pleasure of, shooting some of his album covers, and we did an interview with him in Behind the Set List for Billboard. Anyway, there's a documentary coming called The Hard Way, and it hits on December 6th. I was thrilled today. The director sent me a screening of it, which I'm about halfway through. I was thrilled to shoot the movie poster for this film.
Very cool.
It just went through the film festivals, and it's coming out December 6th. And if you want to learn more about it, go to johnwaitefilm.com. There's a trailer up online that you can watch, and he's led the most interesting life. I can't wait to see the rest of it, but what I've seen so far is absolutely amazing.
Well, and the Babies were one of those bands. If you're familiar with the band, there was a bunch of bands that kind of came out in the late 70s that were kind of like what we now refer to as classic rock, but also had kind of a more of kind of what was then sort of new wave kind of appeal. And I kind of count Tom Petty, to be honest, in that sort of group. And,
I agree.
And the Cars and the Babies, they were all this kind of bridge between classic rock and sort of the new wave and kind of the new sort of sounding things. But they made some wonderful albums on Chrysalis, and And then he bounced. That band broke up, and then he went solo, and he's had a lot of success as a solo artist. And I'm sure it'll be a fascinating documentary. He's got a great voice. God, he's got a cool voice.
Oh my
too.
gosh, and he still sings in the same key. He doesn't tune
original
down a
keys,
half step.
yeah.
And I saw a few of his shows last month, and his last song of the set, he does a Led Zeppelin cover, and he nails it. And anybody who knows, trying to sing those kinds of songs is quite difficult, and to do it well. So very, very well done.
Yeah, and by the way, the guy that I get to chat with every week who fills my ears with so much groovy information is none other than Jay Gilbert. He is the co-founder of label and artist services company Label Logic. He is the curator of the must-read weekly newsletter, Your Morning Coffee, and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, Warner Music Groups, and Fox Home Entertainment.
Oh, thank you, my friend. And this gentleman sitting across from me, one of my favorite people on the planet, is Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music. And one of the first things he taught me when we started doing this podcast was, you got to smile with your voice.
Well, wise advice given to me by others as well. So we sure appreciate that. And of course, we couldn't do the show without our wonderful sponsors. And man, we are so lucky.
We are very fortunate to have some really great sponsors that you and I actually use their products, right?
All the time.
Which is super cool. Your Morning Coffee podcast is brought to you by our friends at Bandzoogle. Built by musicians for musicians. That's a true story. Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform that makes it easy to build a beautiful website and EPK for your music. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to help you sell your music and merch commission-free crowdfunding and fan subscription features, mailing list tools to grow your fan list and send newsletters, social media integrations, and live support from their musician-friendly team 7 days a week. And I've used it, and it's awesome. Your Morning Coffee podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com. Try it for free for 30 days. Just use the promo code Morning Coffee. That's all one word, Morning Coffee. And that'll get you 15% off your first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code Morning Coffee.
And we are also sponsored by Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. It is edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton with help from Alana Bonilla. Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town. Yes, Bands in Town. Over 65 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It is the #1 artist service platform connecting over 550,000 artists with their super fans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms. Indeed. Bandzoogle, Hypebot, and Bands in Town. Boy, we sure appreciate it. And what do you say, Jay? We jump into our stories. Oh, this one is a fascinating one. No surprise here. This is from Billboard. The title of the article is "Too Many Songs, Not Enough Hits. Pop Music is Struggling to Create New Stars." And with all of those all the music being uploaded, no surprise. I cut you off. This is by Elias Light, and he did a wonderful job. Yes,
he's just been killing it lately. And before we dig in, I just wanted to touch on something we've never really talked about before. I don't know if you remember, if you have it in front of you, but there's an illustration that comes with this article that I absolutely loved, and it was by a gentleman named Ryan Inzana. And I went to his website and saw that he does graphic novels. He's done ads for everybody. Take a look at that piece when you get a chance from Your Morning Coffee. It was our lead story.
Yeah, it's a cool image. Yes.
Yeah, I really like his art. I think I'm going to reach out to him and see if he'll do like an album cover or a single cover or something. It's phenomenal art. I love the way he does his work. So,
yeah,
anyway,
we should describe what it is too, though. It basically shows sort of caricatures of artists on the left side of the frame, and then there's kind of a big brick wall that is between them and the microphone on stage with the screaming fans. So, as the subtitle says, execs say that a deluge of new music and the difficulty of influencing TikTok's TikTok's algorithm has made building an audience harder than ever for new acts.
And we've been talking about that a lot lately. That we had a really great quote last week, and there's one this week too. Everyone's an artist, but almost nobody's breaking.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm hearing that from so many people, especially on the A&R side. It's just such a challenge. And what Elias does in this piece is he interviews folks and really gives you a sense of what's happening because, with 100,000 tracks uploaded every day, 100 million tracks, whatever it is, there's a lot. And to rise above that, and then you have to kind of battle with the, virality is not a marketing plan. Right? Just because you have a viral hit doesn't mean you're going to put butts in the seats. It doesn't mean that you're going to have a long career. In fact, there's some that would argue that could, get in the way of some of those goals. But I thought this was a really great piece.
Yeah, well, and we've kind of mentioned this, the virality or it's going viral. What does that really mean? There is no agreed upon definition of what that is. And
right.
And so, there's this kind of generic phrase we all refer to and repeat. But what the hell is that? But given how many different artists and, daily. And what's interesting about this article, too, they kind of also mention, when you're in the pre-social media days, an established artist had sort of an established track record. And so you definitely were able to open doors easier once you were working with established artists. So if you had a name the artist, a successful artist, then radio would kind of let them in the door just based on the past history of their success. This article is kind of saying even established artists are struggling. And that is scary because, as we know, this industry relies so much on catalog and so much on established artists to cover the freight for breaking new artists. If you're having trouble with both sides of that equation, yikes.
Yeah, and you mentioned, what is virality? Is it having 1 million views on TikTok? Is that a viral hit? I don't know. I don't think anybody's really, put a number on all of those different things for, whether it's streams or TikTok or Twitch or whatever. Elias points out that there's a sense around the music industry right now, from managers to marketers to A&R executives, that it's a bigger and more level playing field, and everything is getting lost. And that was a quote from Chris Anakute, who manages Muni Long, and he's the one that said that everyone's an artist, but almost no one's breaking. There are many ways to judge and argue about what does breaking mean.
Yep.
You asked what virality mean. What's breaking an artist today? Label executives tend to use streaming numbers as a barometer, right? Mm-hmm. While managers prefer to look at ticket sales, and I've noticed that a lot too. The labels are looking at sales streams and downloads, and managers are looking at how the tour is and what the cap rooms and all of that stuff. But the number of new acts vaulting to the top 10, let's say, of the Hot 100 has declined a lot in the last few years. From 2001 to 2004, over 30 first-timers cracked the top 10 annually. In 2019, however, only 15 first-timers reached the top 10, and in 2021, the lowest number of new entrants this millennium, just 13.
Yikes. And it says, as he goes on to say, the drought has some managers and label executives worried. All of my industry peers are having this conversation. What's next? And that's, how did you pronounce Chris's name?
Anakute?
Anakute. Let's go with that. That's right. He was saying,
who knows?
Others use more colorful language to describe the current landscape. It's abysmal, according to one A&R executive turned manager. The market's dry as fuck, declares a veteran major label A&R executive who requested anonymity to speak candidly. There's less and less shit working. The frontline label business signing new artists is in trouble. I can honestly say right now that nobody knows what's going on, another longtime major label A&R person says.
Yeah, that's pretty strong words.
Yes, it is.
They say that insiders have plenty of theories about why the market for new artists has become so difficult, right? Chief among them is this deluge of new music, we talked about. Mm-hmm. It's become so easy for aspiring artists to release tracks that are hitting on streaming services by the hard drive full, making it harder for any single tune to stand out amid the glut. Quote, due to the sheer number of things coming out, songs that were shoo-ins for being hits 5 to 10 years ago now have to fight to see daylight. And that was a quote from veteran producer Warren Oak Felder, who's worked with Usher, Demi Lovato. Even the biggest record companies are taking notice. Quote, if there are 80,000 tracks a day, and we think that number's probably higher, uploaded to major digital service providers, then major label market share is going to be diluted by default, Sony chairman Rob Stringer told investors this summer.
And as it goes on, it says, in addition, the reach and influence of once powerful mediums like radio and late night TV have also declined. And then this is in parentheses, a number one radio song doesn't mean fuck anymore, laments one longtime A&R executive. Managers say that even marquee streaming playlists don't have the commercial oomph they had just a few years ago. And again, in parentheses, now, just because you're in a top 10 slot on a big Spotify playlist, it doesn't mean your audience is growing, one manager says. And then the rise of TikTok.
I'm hearing that a lot.
Yes, exactly. The rise of TikTok has complicated matters, too. The platform has become a hit maker. But it's an unpredictable marketing tool, less susceptible to manipulation and less responsive to star power than other platforms. And that's the thing I was talking about at the beginning. When your existing stars aren't necessarily resonating on TikTok, you got a problem. Engineering a viral moment is akin to walking into a corner store and emerging with a winning lottery ticket. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to what breaks there, says Justin Lehman, and who manages,
Aminé.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. And others. And without breaking there, it's difficult to say what else can cause a big moment to happen for anybody. And that gets people shaken in their boots because, we've been in those meetings, in those marketing plans, and, when there's a stability to things that historically have worked and a comfort level. And when those things are moving and shaking, it's scary for people that are trying to market artists and develop artists.
Yeah, I'm doing a panel in a couple of weeks at the Music Tectonics conference in Santa Monica on A&R and data. So I've been talking to my friends that do A&R, and this article is spot on. Their heads are spinning right now because there's so many different ways to find that next big thing. But the ones that are taking it really seriously aren't just looking at the data. They're not just looking at social numbers or TikTok or streams or whatnot. They're trying to get a sense of who the artist is and if it fits their label. Mm-hmm. And that's what I find really interesting is how do you look at data the right way and not just look at something that's popping on TikTok, because as I've been told over and over this last week, there are some labels that are going after that, but there's a lot of risk there because some of those artists have never toured and some have never even played a live show. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of them haven't even finished several songs. So taken all together, all these factors mean that seizing and then holding the attention of music-loving masses is much more challenging. It used to be that you released an album, got Rolling Stone to review it, went on tour, got on late night TV, and that's how you broke, said one senior executive at a major label. Even if luck was a factor, the path was clear. It was 4 or 5 things. Now you need 4 or 5 things a week, or at least a month, or else your streams don't go up. So these days, the recipe to break is like 45 ingredients long instead of 4 or 5. That was a paraphrase from Nick Stern, a longtime manager of Metric, Joe. He just said it's harder than ever to be a new artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I have since we've been doing this, we've talked about, that sort of the challenge relative to what it was like when we were there. When you were making marketing plans in our early days in the music business, there were fairly straightforward verticals that you knew to do depending on the act. And that, it wasn't templatized, but it was templatized. There were certain kind of verticals, again, that were there, what's the plan for video?
There was less of them.
There was just far less of them. Exactly. And so when you were, doing those marketing plans and moving forward with them and budgeting for them, it just was, I wouldn't say it wasn't it just wasn't as complicated as it is
wasn't
now.
as, you're spot on. It wasn't as complicated. Yes, there were some variations to that theme. We didn't have a cookie cutter marketing plan, but those things that you did to get publicity, merch sales, tour, radio, though there were fewer of those, to your point. My friend Jonathan Daniel was quoted in this article. He's the founder of Crush, and if you don't know that, he manages Sia, Lord, Panic at the Disco, so many others, Green Day. Jonathan Daniel believes that characterizing the current music industry as abysmal for new artists, that's a little crazy. Still, he acknowledges that it feels more difficult to break without a true mainstream. Everybody's feed is siloed. And in a way, that's awesome. You have unlimited choice, but it makes it harder for something to go mainstream.
Yeah. Many of the sources who spoke for this story believe the music industry needs to reposition itself to adjust to this new reality. If you take away stars, major labels have to shift their thing, Jonathan said. They've always been a filter for that. If you remove that, say there are no stars and everyone has their own cult followings, what does the major label do? And that's really a big question. And again, we've talked so much lately about the value of catalog in terms of the success of streaming and what high percentage is listened to are catalog artists. Yeah. So how do you, when I was reading this, I'm like, man, that really puts the majors in a bit of a bind. If you're not developing these catalog artists, what the hell are you doing?
And it makes it a challenge. And Stephen Cooper addressed that. He's Warner Music Group's outgoing CEO. He told a conference last month, that Warner Music Group had reduced their dependency on superstars. I thought that was super interesting and it addresses your point. But major labels aren't the only ones that will need to adapt. Quote, "The way people measure success across the board is not correct," argues Connor Lawrence, co-founder, COO of Indify, a platform that helps independent artists find investors in return for a portion of their streaming income. So, the music industry has changed while you and I have been having this conversation. We often say that. So it is going to be challenging moving forward because it's easier than ever to blow up and have a viral moment. And it's harder than ever to have a career. And that is going to be the challenge of A&R going forward.
Yes, absolutely. But a really interesting article. Good job by Elias. And
he's been killing it lately.
Yeah, but boy, frightening things to be thinking about. When you kind of have to completely shift your perspective on what breaking an artist is and again, you're talking about less of a reliance on superstar acts. I mean, that is, to me, that goes to the very core and foundation of any media company's business, So how do you adjust to that? I don't have any great answers. I'm sure we'll think about that over the next week, the next time we get on the podcast and share our thoughts then. But boy, as we sit here today, I'm kind of picking up my jaw dropping off the floor. Crazy stuff.
Yeah. Well, the exciting part is it's so dynamic. It's changing every week, and we'll continue to follow it super closely. It's going to give us a lot of things to talk about on this podcast.
Right. And kind of along the same lines, the next story is from Hypebot and Bill Werde. Music industry growth is booming, and it's slowing. What? So, so many different data points that are concerning, I suppose, Jay, or something to be considered. It is a wacky
I sent
time.
This article to a couple of friends of ours that are music industry attorneys, and they both shot me a note back saying that this was very thought out, very thoughtful, because they talk about a couple of different projections in the music business that we talk about. And if you're not an industry insider, you might not hear this every week. But Goldman Sachs has one that a lot of people use as a guidepost. And then Mark Mulligan from Media created kind of an updated one recently that a lot of people have been using, and they think it's super accurate. But what Bill Werde does is he talks about those two, but he's also talking about let's take a step back and look at where streaming is currently and how it's trending, and let's take this all with a grain of salt, because we don't know what's going to happen in 2030.
Yes. And Bill, by the way, he's a former Billboard editorial director, and he's the director of the Bandier Program for Music and the Entertainment Industries of the Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University, and that is a mouthful. And a version of this essay appeared in his free weekly full rate no cap email. So that's and it's of course on Hypebot now. That's what we are referencing. Because he says, in the past few months, we've seen reports from music industry analysts that the recorded music business will grow explosively by 2030. Goldman Sachs, for example, predicts $80 billion in annual revenue. Media includes publishing in its 2030 prediction and predicts a robust and pleasingly specific $89.1 billion. According to the IFPI, the global recorded biz was worth just under $26 billion in 2021. So as Bill says, congratulations to all of us. The music business will triple in 8 years. Start spending immediately.
Not
he
so
says, not
fast.
so fast. Right.
He says this is an almost too easy illustration of the folly of analysts. Just 5 years ago, Goldman Sachs created headlines in every music trade, trumpeting their bold prediction: the global recorded music business would be worth $41 billion by 2030. Eureka! But there's one thing. Last year, the global biz was just a hair under $26 billion, and many expect it to break $30 billion by 2022. Suddenly, $41 billion by 2030 feels woefully inadequate. Cue Goldman Sachs' latest report predicting the global recorded market worth $80 billion by 2030. So they almost doubled their forecast to now $80 billion by 2030.
And he says, but when we poke at some of these growth targets, well, the wood is soft. Nobody likes soft wood, Jay. But he points out, he said there's 4 hurdles in the music business we will need to clear if we are going to experience the sort of growth that a Goldman Sachs is predicting. And I got to say, these all make pretty darn good sense. I'll take the first one.
Sure.
He mentions, number one, streaming growth is already slowing. He said the always sharp music business worldwide nailed 2 areas of concern in a recent article. First and foremost, streaming revenue, while continuing to grow, is growing at a slower rate. That Goldman Sachs projection basically requires double-digit growth for the next decade. But when we look at the last quarter of the major labels, growth has slowed to about 6%, which is kind of a blended average of Warner's, Universal, and Sony, none of whom made it to double-digit growth. In other words, Goldman Sachs came out and made a bold projection, then we immediately fell behind in the first available quarter.
Wow.
Oops. So consider these numbers. The global recorded biz grew by about 18% from 2020 to 2021, according to the IFPI. But Bill believes that was the only year during the last 7 consecutive years of growth that saw double-digit growth. Even if we could somehow average 10% growth per year, that would take the global recorded biz to just over $64 billion, a far cry from the grandiose numbers that some are predicting. There you go, confusing me with facts again.
Right. So to your point, streaming growth, the growth is slowing. The second point is that advertising revenue is in a free fall. Music Business Worldwide noted the slowdown in advertising revenue from 2020 to 2021. The RIAA noted a jump from $1.2 billion to nearly $1.8 billion in ad-supported streaming revenue. That was around 12% of the recorded U.S. business last year. Not nothing. So those dollars may become harder to come by. Given current trends and global economic shakiness, the global slowdown in ad spending is the number one topic in the ad industry trades, and it's already buckling companies like Meta and Snap.
Yeah, and note, he didn't say advertising revenue is in decline. He said advertising revenue is in free fall. Those are very different words to be using as descriptors. Another point he makes, and the number 3 point he makes, is investors are already backing away from some deals. Now, of course, Jay, we've been talking about some of these deals for the last 2 years, and my God, they are just head spinning. But as he pointed out, in the case of like BMI, who wanted to sell, they were trying to sell themselves for a reported $1.5 and $3 billion, but dropped the sales effort when that price tag was allegedly not met. And while many question whether BMI long run as a nonprofit made sense for this sort of sale, the article also notes the company is the latest in a series of. This is a Bloomberg article, by the way. The company is the latest in a series of major music entities that hasn't convinced a buyer to pay what it wanted. Concord, a label, one of the largest independent music companies in the world, ended its sale process after rejecting every offer as not big enough. Other companies that have explored a sale, including Round Hill Music, Anthem Entertainment Group, and Tempo Music, have yet to find a buyer, though they have not publicly ended the hunt. So again, investment dollars aren't operational. They don't contribute to the global revenue number, of course, but as interest rates spike up and cash becomes more expensive, it would seem that investors are wavering in their confidence on music as a great place to park dollars. And of course, you know, that the when you're talking about interest rates and the sort of predicted kind of economic downturn around the world, that's going to cool a lot of interest for lots of different verticals, but for sure in music, it's been red hot. It's sort of like real estate, so we'll see.
Yeah, and number 4 is all of these boom models are predicated on as yet unmaterialized international and emerging market growth. This might be the biggest knock on these models. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely believe in the enormous dynamic potential of global markets. But as pandemics and supply chain issues continue to destabilize global economics, particularly emerging economies, which can inherently provide unique challenges in the best of circumstances, banking on unprecedented transformative growth in these markets feels like a fool's mission. I mean, here's the bottom line: is the industry has grown these last few years. The U.S. market has largely paced that growth. Here, he puts a chart in here you should check out where he shows what that growth is. But I mean, to just put a fine point on this, that he says it's not all hopelessness. He said markets and regions like India, Asia, China, sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, they offer unfathomable creative and commercial promise and the whole host of stars and styles that will dominate U.S. charts in the years ahead. It's just that folks need to practice some common sense, some sobriety when it comes to forecasting growth. And I think that's really encapsulates this entire article. It's not that we're right and you're wrong. We don't know. These are forecasts. But if you look at the trend, they might be a little grandiose, and we may just want to take another look at it.
But so much of these predictions were kind of based on a lot of these developing countries bringing in and kind of coming into the market and rising all of the boats in terms of the profitability for the industry. And as he pointed out, that's not necessarily certainly it's not a given, and in fact, it may not even really started happening yet. So. I don't know. Great article, great things to think about. And there's, it's that Goldman Sachs thing was super optimistic at the very least. And
and then they had to sort of increase it, almost double it. So there is, there's definitely some upside there. One thing I wanted to add that wasn't part of this piece, but if you subscribe to Billboard Pro, you get several newsletters that Billboard puts together, and one of them is from our friend Glenn Peoples. It's called The Ledger. We talked about it a little bit last week. And there's a quote I want to pull from it this week because I thought it was really interesting. So in The Ledger, in his newsletter, Glenn Peoples writes, "The future of music streaming looks more like gas stations than fast food." And he explains why. Gas stations have turned into convenience stores that sell junk food, beverages, and household staples. Gas itself is almost a loss leader. Stations make their margins on everything else: a $3 bottle of Coke, a $2 candy bar, a $6 package of ibuprofen. According to a report of the economics of gas stations from The Hustle, stations only earn about 1.4% profit margin on fuel, compared to 200% on soda machines and 100% on lottery tickets. So I thought that was a really interesting take because we've been talking a lot about Spotify acquiring an audiobook distributor and getting into podcasts and all these other ancillary things that DSPs are starting to get involved in to generate more revenue than just from the streaming.
Yeah, it's funny. I was having that discussion about gas stations with my kids, and when you get to a certain age, you start to,
Yeah.
every now and again, you go, it's not that way anymore at all. And one of my gigs as one Christmas break when I was in college, I worked at a gas station, but it was a full service gas station. The first thing you did, somebody pulled up to the full service side, and I went out there with the squeegee and I started the windows, put the gas in. Nobody does that anymore. Nobody does that. And that gas station, their other business was mechanics. So
in certain states, you can't pump your own gas. Like
That's
in California, we can pump our own gas.
Yes.
But I believe it's Washington State or Oregon. I can't remember which. I think it's Washington State where you pull in. You can't get out and pump your own gas. And I worked at a gas station, years and years ago, out of high school. And I remember we made our money. We would check everybody's oil.
Yes.
And a lot of times you're a quart low.
Yes.
And with the service, of course, and when you needed to change a tire, you needed help or something like that. So I think that's going to be true in the music business as well. So our last piece is from the Wall Street Journal. It's written by Jessica Tunkel, Anna Steele, and Salvador Rodriguez. And the headline is TikTok parent ByteDance plans music streaming expansion. And I got to tell you, I received more emails and texts about this than any other story this last week because we've been kind of talking about it on the sidelines, and now it's starting to heat up because TikTok's parent ByteDance is now meeting with the labels to talk about it, to secure licenses. And the scary part for me, I think, is TikTok. It's a place where these viral hits can happen, and who would identify these hits first? Well, of course, it's going to be TikTok. Mm-hmm. So they're going to know before anybody else if something is taking off, and so they're going to have first place to go in and maybe sign these artists to their label, and then they can distribute it. And I think it makes me a little nervous having this mini ecosystem within this larger ecosystem.
It says ByteDance has discussed in recent months launching its Resso music streaming service, that's its name, which currently is only available in India, Indonesia, and Brazil in more than a dozen additional markets, according to some of the people. Now, the U.S. wouldn't be part of that next phase of expansion, but ByteDance has said it wants the service to be available globally so that users can discover songs on the short-form video app and then easily subscribe to music. Of course they do. Why would they not want that, Jay?
Well, yeah. ByteDance is negotiating with the music business that's been on a rapid upswing for the last several years, thanks to streaming growth has made them scream, as well as the establishment of standard rates for music licensing, which you and I talk about quite a bit. The talks, though, have been strained at times, and that's over disagreements about how do you value TikTok's promotional benefits for the labels. So as it's exploded in popularity, particularly with young people, TikTok has helped many songs become mega hits by going viral. There's that word again. TikTok's popularity exploded during the pandemic lockdown, and many Billboard Hot 100 hits got their start or a boost from the service. So we know the power of what TikTok can do.
Yes. But again, but beware of that power, as ByteDance's expansion into music streaming would be a means of keeping, of course, its large user base within its ecosystem. While subscription would open up another source of revenue, music streaming is a hard business because of how much is paid out to labels. Market leader Spotify has expanded, as you were saying, Jay, in podcasts and audiobooks in an effort to improve margins. So, we keep coming back to our days at Universal when we had all these companies come in with all these grandiose ideas about how they were going to profit from our music, but nobody wants to make those payments for those music. They build businesses on catalogs of music without really paying enough. And that's always a battle with all of these companies that want to expand into, say, streaming. And it's like, it costs money and it's expensive. And
you and I talked about that at the time when we were working together, and we still talk about it, how what you just described, where companies would come in and they'd say, we'd like to license your music. It'd be really good for you to be on our platform. And that's like somebody saying, hey, I want you to shoot my event, Mr. Photographer. It'd be good for your portfolio.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you need to get paid.
Yes.
And Apple Music and YouTube also have sizable music streaming businesses, right? And they compete for users. YouTube is leaning into short form video, just like TikTok, to try to hit that younger demo. But that younger demo has become accustomed to not paying for a lot of content, including music.
Yeah, it says this is interesting. ByteDance's revenue continues to expand, up nearly 80% to $61.7 billion in 2021. But so too are the company's expenses as it focuses on growth. The Chinese company's cost of sales came in at $27.4 billion for 2021, up 79% from the previous year, the Wall Street Journal reported earlier this month. To expand its music streaming services, the Chinese internet company needs to reach agreements with all of the major labels, of course. Already, music executives have expressed concerns to ByteDance about how difficult it is to make money through Resso, their own streaming service, in the 3 markets it is in today. People familiar with those discussions said Sony Music Group recently allowed its agreement with Resso to lapse in all 3 countries, resulting in the company's library of songs being taken off the app. That which is interesting, very interesting. So the 3 markets where it exists, one major has already pulled out.
That's right. And look, it needs to be in the U.S. We need to see it in the U.S. to really make a judgment here. But similar to that freemium model, that Spotify has, Resso offers a free ad-supported tier as well, and as an on-demand subscription tier. So while artists and labels are paid less for streams on Spotify's ad-supported tier than on its subscription service, the music business has applauded the streaming giant's use of free as a funnel to subscription, but very few users are paying for Resso. So that's the difference. That there, you can have that ad-supported tier of Spotify, but there's data that shows that converts people to paying, and conversely, they're not really seeing that yet on Resso.
No. Of course, those are developing countries in many ways when it comes to streaming services, but still, that is a little bit alarming. As it says, while Resso's markets are known to be difficult for conversion, these people said that compares with close to 45% of Spotify users globally who do switch. So you're talking about a big variance between what Spotify has typically seen historically relative to that. As this article goes on, it says in some markets such as Indonesia, Resso has experimented with different business models, such as by allowing users to get a period of free listening if they watch a video ad, said people familiar with the matter. Music label executives aren't opposed to such arrangements, but they want to make sure they get a negotiated cut out of the revenue, the people said. Resso also frustrated label partners in that the free service wasn't differentiated from the paid subscription offering, so there was no incentive for consumers to upgrade, the people said. So
yeah, it's still in its infancy, right?
It is. It is.
It's in a few markets. They're going to expand that, and we'll learn a lot more. But to just kind of recap this, as ByteDance, TikTok, works to expand Resso's market, they're also looking at and looking for ways that Resso could be integrated into the TikTok app. And this is what I find really interesting. That integration would make it so easy for artists to, who market themselves on TikTok to earn more money through streaming. And I think that's the question that hasn't really been answered yet is what's that integration going to look like?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So to be continued.
Well, to be continued. And of course, given that major labels have ownership in Spotify and things like that, are you going to... It complicates the matters and it changes the perspective with which you analyze the opportunities or lack of opportunities in such a deal. So, oh boy, Jay, it just gets so interesting and so many things to think about and so many changes. But I do find these especially the article, the Billboard article about how hard it is to break artists. I mean, it just really concerns me that because again, historically, that has been how companies are built and how they're able to build to develop new artists is the comfort of having those established artists and that the
how
catalog.
Are we going to pivot and change to adapt to that? And that line keeps echoing in my head. It's so easy to be an artist today, but it's harder to be a star. And to your point, you need to be a star if you're going to have catalog, which is a majority of our business.
Yes, absolutely. Well, on that note, Jay, we will ponder these things for the next week as we wrap up this edition of the Your Morning Coffee podcast, episode 114. It happens to be. We want to thank our sponsors, Bandzoogle, Hypebot, and Bands in Town for their continuing support and just overall grooviness. Can I just say that, Jay? They're just overall groovy. We really appreciate it. And of course, who else is groovy but the folks that listen in? So thank you all for listening, Jay, and I really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to the newsletter because Jay burns the midnight oil when he's putting all of those articles together, and he knows what's important for you to know. So take advantage of that resource always. So on behalf of the hardest working man in show business, Jay Gilbert, and myself, I'm not even on that list, but we certainly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time on the Your Morning Coffee podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.